Are you having trouble finishing your story? Maybe you have the beginning and can write the first, 30% of it, but then you get stuck. Or maybe you have the beginning and the end, but you're having trouble filling out the middle. And this can actually happen for both individual stories as well as series. Maybe you wrote the first book in your series, but you're having a hard time coming up with subsequent installments. Well, it's all part of the same problem. And today we're going to dive into why you're having trouble finishing your story and what the solution is, okay? Hi there. Do you want to write fiction that readers gush about, but you can't figure out how to fill in the beginning, middle, or end of your story? I can help with that. Do you struggle to flesh out character or plot, or to stick with your story long enough to finish it? I can help with that. Once your book is written, are you totally clueless about marketing? Do you find yourself Googling how to market a book or how to make money on fiction? I can help with that. Welcome to the Prolific Author Podcast. You know you're meant to write fiction, but you can't seem to nail down the skills or processes that make it simple and repeatable, not to mention fun. So you wait around for the muse to show up, try to force your story into a template or outline, or take months, if not years, to discover your story. Plot twist, there's a better way. Hi, I'm Liesl, USA Today bestselling author, story psychologist, writing craft geek, Christian, and story clarity coach. After 10 years of trying to master fiction using the old industry standard writing advice, I still felt lost. I finally learned what fictional storytelling and the human template are really about: humanity, emotional connection, and serving our readers by giving them relief through vicarious experience. Imagine learning how to flesh out your characters, plot, world, and theme with such definition and clarity that every story you ever write lands with readers and makes people go, wow, now there's an author. Imagine knowing how to drill down to the heart of your story, to learn what it's really about, and tell the unique story that only you can tell, so that you can get more readers, more downloads, more royalties, and of course, more fiction writing success. This is the podcast for you. We are prolific authors. Hi there, everyone. Welcome back to the Prolific Author Podcast. I hope everyone had an amazing Halloween. Mine was very fun. I felt like I didn't get much sleep, and as usual, there was entirely too much sugar floating around, but that's okay. I got to see some family members and some fun costumes. Okay, so let's dive into why you're having trouble finishing your story. I am going to start with a story about a class I took in college. I decided that I was interested in archery, and I took an archery beginner's class. Now, I'm going to tell you that when I started, I was really not very good. In fact, I might have been one of the worst people in the class. I couldn't understand at first why it was so hard to hit the target. I mean, Legolas on Lord of the Rings makes it look so dang easy, right? But here's the thing. If you've never done archery, you probably don't entirely understand how much goes into it. There are things you wouldn't even think about from watching someone shoot an arrow. There's a particular way you have to hold your arms. There's a particular way you have to hold your elbows. There's a particular way you have to square your shoulders. There's a frame that you need to keep your body in. You have to plant your feet in a particular way and sometimes have to turn them depending on what kind of shot you're making. So there's all these different variables that you have to keep in mind. And the reason I wasn't good at it at first was because not only did I not know what I didn't know, but then basically the archery instructor just threw all of these variables at me and I had to try and keep track of all of them, like more than a dozen. So it took a lot of time for me to be able to do that, to keep all of the variables straight. And it wasn't until the very end of the semester that I finally started to click with archery and figure it out. So as I said at the beginning, I was doing everything I thought that I was supposed to be doing, and I couldn't understand why I was having a hard time hitting the target. But I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't realize that some of the things I was doing, I was just doing wrong. I needed someone to learn from and to show me these things. And if you had asked, I probably would have told you I was doing everything right because, again, I just didn't know what I didn't know. Well, the same is true of writing. Most authors dream of writing stories that are loved by thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of readers, but they don't know what they don't know. So I'm here to tell you that the normal state of storytelling is not to take forever to write your story, okay? That's actually not normal, and it should not take you very long to figure out the story you're trying to tell. If it is, that's actually a problem. Don't get me wrong, we all will have things that we need to figure out that we get a little bit stuck on, but figuring out these little nuances of our story should take hours or days at most. If it's taking you longer than that, then you actually have a problem, okay? It's not just writer's block. It's not just indecision. It probably means that you're missing a vital component of your story. My TPA method, which TPA stands for the Prolific Author Method, helps you not only figure out your story, but triage your story. It can help you figure out what you're missing, because that missing part is the reason you're stuck, I guarantee it. Now, of course, you could be missing one of many components. We all know there's a lot of moving parts to a fictional story. But if you have any of the problems I mentioned at the beginning, like you only write the first, small percentage, 25, 30% of your story and then get stuck, or you have the beginning and the end, but you don't know how to fill out the middle, or you've written the first book in your series, but struggle with writing subsequent books. If you have one of those problems or something closely related to it, I'm going to go ahead and guess that you're probably missing your internal framework. So let me tell you another story. Some years ago, me and two of my sisters were all rooming together. This was right after college, and I decided that I needed to buy a bookshelf to hold some of my many, many books. I got the bookshelf in the mail. I believe we bought it from Amazon, and of course, it was just in a box. It wasn't all put together, so I had to put it together myself. Now, I'm not the most handy person out there, but I know my way around, the basics, a screwdriver, a hammer, that sort of thing. And when I started putting the shelf together, I got out my little toolbox and started trying to put it together, essentially. Okay, they had these little screws, and no matter what I did, I could not find a tool that would fit into them. I tried every tool that I had, and I found some that kind of fit, but it was really, really hard to turn the screws, and I just couldn't figure out what was wrong. I was sure it was just me being a girl and not being very handy, right? Well, I tried for basically 3 days to put this thing together. Finally, one of my brothers came over to help me, and what we discovered is that there was a little baggie I had missed inside the materials that came with the shelf, and they actually had a specialized tool for those screws. Okay, so it wasn't just that these were mutant screws that no screwdriver would fit. I mean, that was kind of the case, but it was because they actually gave you a tool that worked with their product. And I just didn't realize that. I hadn't seen it. I hadn't read it in the instructions, and as soon as we found that tool and started using it, man, that shelf was so easy to put together. It just was not hard at all. So I went from throwing up my hands and just thinking, okay, I suck at putting together bookshelves, to realizing that there was something I was missing, right? And when I had that, I wished I'd had it 3 days before. It would have been so much easier. Guys, this is the same role that the internal framework plays in your story, okay? The internal framework is what the entire story points toward. I mean, we're talking everything. The characters, the arcs, the plot, the world, all the events, the scenes. It is the goal of your story and the story that you are actually trying to tell. And much like the little tool that I completely missed in the bookshelf materials, once you have this tool and you can really nail it down for your story, plotting out the rest of the story becomes easy, probably easier than it has ever been for you. It's true that the first book we write, or the first time we sit down to write, we have a hard time doing it. And from there, we sort of develop this mindset that book writing is always going to be hard, that we're never going to be able to, quickly or easily figure out what events happen in our story or how it's going to end, or, whatever the case may be. But guys, it doesn't have to be hard. You should be able to plan your story fairly easy and with confidence, but you have to have the right tools first, okay? Now, I said that the internal framework is the story's goal. To achieve anything in any part of our lives, we need clear goals. Let's use fitness as an example. Let's say we decide that we want to get fit, but we don't really define what fit means for us, and we don't really have any clear goals that we want to achieve. So we kind of totter around and try different things. We maybe go on a run one day and then lift some weights half-heartedly the next day, and then go to the gym and do the kettlebell, but we're not going to have much progress because we don't have a clear vision for where we're going or what we want to accomplish, right? It's the same thing with your story. You need to have a clear goal for where the character is going, both internally as well as externally. Otherwise, the characters and the plot, they're just going to meander around and never get where they're trying to go. I promise, even if you don't know what it is yet, your story is trying to go somewhere. You're trying to make some point about humanity or the human condition, or something in the very vast realm of emotional human experience. But a lot of authors write their story without ever completely understanding what that internal framework is, okay? So it kind of meanders around and never quite gets to the point and never quite feels cohesive. And meanwhile, you as the author are frustrated because you can't figure out the right ending for your story or the right middle, and you have no confidence that it's going to be really, really good. But I'm telling you, if you can nail down the framework, it becomes very, very easy to figure out where your story is going. Now, to use more of a story example, let's look at Lord of the Rings. What if Frodo didn't create a plan to get to Mordor? What if he just took the ring and then he went left and he went right and someone took him on a boat and then someone took him on horseback and then he went east and then he went west? I mean, if he wanted to get there and accomplish his goal, he had to have a plan that would take him there by the most direct and easiest route. Okay, that is true of your story as well. So if you can't finish your story, if you're having trouble with that, it's because you need to nail down your internal framework. It is probably the most important thing that you are not doing yet. So here's the thing. I have been putting together writing courses for some time. In fact, I started kind of trying to help authors, close to 3 years ago now. And I've had some success, and I've helped a lot of authors, and I've sold some courses. But it's taken me a long time to figure out what I actually want to teach and what I am most passionate about teaching. To be honest, I have been studying Storycraft my entire life, even before I knew I was doing it. I was, like probably most of you, a major book nerd. I always had my nose in a book, and I grew up in a family where we watched a lot of movies because, at least at the time, going to the movie theater was a relatively affordable form of entertainment, and we were always too poor to go do anything else. So we watched a lot of movies, and I grew up loving movies, but my family also was big on analyzing them. Afterward, we would sit around and talk about the characters and why they did what they did, and other people would look at us and think we were crazy. But we loved it. I was always analyzing story. And as I've, turned that into more of a formal education in my adulthood, I've studied the way that other people study story. People who write craft books, people like Joseph Campbell, and, just different frameworks like that. You have the hero's journey, you have the Virgin's Promise, you have things like Story Grid and Save the Cat, and we could go on and on and on. I mean, I think I've read most craft books that are out there on the market. And here's what I've learned. Most people who study story and write craft books about it, they are studying stories from the outside. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. What they're basically doing is finding and identifying patterns that are true across many stories, and that gives us a lot of value. It tells us what a good story has, a lot of the points that we need to include, what readers are looking for in stories, and all of that is really great to understand. I think you should familiarize yourself with story structure and understand the different moving parts of a story, because that is how you will become a real expert on storycraft. However, all of that said, you also have to understand that what makes a story truly work for a reader is not the stuff that's external. That can be super cool and people can really love it, but it is the internal parts of the story that really hook the reader and make them feel something about your story. So to really write a story that works, that resonates with readers, that will bring those readers back to you again and again, you need to understand not only the external patterns, you need to understand the internal part of the story, okay? It's actually probably more important than understanding the external parts, although they are equally important and do work together. To give you another analogy, let's say you wanted to build a car from the ground up. You are someone who loves tinkering with cars and building them. You can't build a car engine by looking at the outside. It doesn't work that way. I mean, theoretically, you could build the shape of a car, but it's not going to run for you, okay? In order to really build a car that will run, that will work for you, that will function as a car should, you need to understand all of the internal moving parts. You need to understand what's under the hood. You need to understand not only what parts are under there, but how they all work together and why they all work together and why each part functions as it does to propel the vehicle forward. Once you get that, then you'll be a real master at the automotive trade, right? Same thing with your writing. While the stuff on the outside is important, it really is, and it serves its purpose, you need to understand the internal better, starting with your internal framework. In fact, the internal framework is the very first thing that I teach in my course. So as I said, I've been doing this for a while now, and I've had different courses in different iterations, in different formats. And most recently, I've been doing a membership. And I'm sure with how much I've gone back and forth with my different types of courses, I've given a few of you whiplash. But I will not do that anymore, I promise. I am putting together my ultimate system for how to master your story, how to become an expert at the craft of storytelling, okay? My system is different than anything else being taught out on the market because it's based on psychology and the human template, which means it really is science-based. It will give you a deep and abiding understanding not only of the different elements of story, but of what readers are really looking for in a story, what they want, and more importantly, why they want it, so that every story you write moving forward will appeal to your readers in a very compelling way. You'll know how to finish every story you ever write moving forward. And guys, it feels so good to have confidence in what you write, to know that it's going to land with readers and that your story will be epic because you are appealing to the human part of your readers and what their brain craves when they go looking for their next fiction book. So, I have not finished putting this program together yet, but I'm working on it and I'm definitely planning to be done by the end of the year. So if this is something you're interested in, if you want to learn to tell stories this way and to be able to finish every story that you think of in a relatively short time because you know exactly how to figure out what the story is you're trying to tell, then I'm going to encourage you to get on the wait list. There's a link in the bio, and all that means is that as soon as the program becomes available, I will email you and let you know. So let's kind of recap here. If you are having trouble finishing your story, meaning if you write the first, 20 or 30% of it and then get stuck, or if you have the beginning and end but don't know how to fill out the middle, or maybe it's something more generic, like the big, major events in your plot, but you just have a hard time transitioning between them. Or maybe you have the first book in the series, but you're struggling to write more books. You really want to because the first book did well, but you're just having a hard time, nailing down what those books are going to be about. Okay, anything in the realm of what I've mentioned here, what it means is that you're missing a major and vital component of your story. More than likely, it's the internal framework. This is what your entire story points toward. It is the goal of the story, and you really have to have it nailed down. Once you do, it is not hard to figure out what the events will be, what the transitions will be, what the beginning, middle, and ending will be. It'll all just click into place. And anytime you get stuck, it's very easy to just ask yourself a series of questions and you can unstick yourself, okay? It's not about crafting your story in any particular way or me telling you what to write. It's about figuring out what your story is about and then being able to really easily figure out the answers you have to any question about your story, all right? So if that's something you're interested in learning, click the link in the show notes and get on the wait list. That is all I have for today. I hope everyone has a wonderful week of writing as we head into the holiday season. I know, where did 2022 go? But make sure in all the hype and craziness that you get your words in, that you get your storytelling done. And remember, there is always a market for awesome. Before you go, if you found value in this episode, can you do me a solid and share it with other authors you think might benefit from it? Remember, the rising tide lifts all boats. Also, if you haven't yet, would you be willing to leave me a review on Apple Podcasts? It's the only way for me to know that you're enjoying the podcast, and it helps Apple recommend it to other authors like you who might benefit from it. Finally, if you haven't already, hop over and join the Prolific Author community on Facebook. Inside, authors network, ask questions, and I often do teaching via Facebook Lives. Thank you so much for listening today. Happy story crafting this week, and remember, there is always a market for awesome.